You are watching Pausing with Erik. We pause for a second or two. How do we keep life coherent when so much is changing? This is episode 301, Bridge at the Top. Today we are talking about coherence. At the beginning of each episode you can hear me saying, how do we keep life coherent when so much is changing? And coherence is our sort of greater goal with pausing. Coherence is what it's all about. So coherence is our long-term goal for our life. Our long-term situation is sort of our fundamental situation, sort of carrying all the others in a sense. It's for when we make plans for the future, or when we worry about our future. This is the image for coherence. A bridge. We pause and work towards a consistent sense of manageability. Coherence is how we bridge our past, present, and future. So today we will take a look at coherence and look at it in the context of where we are right now, both as individuals and as a group, as a society. So what we want is consistency and manageability. So a life without consistent manageability is a life that feels overwhelming. So what we want is instead to have each step, if possible, feel manageable, like this is okay, I can do this. And we want that okay, manageable feeling consistently, each step. And when we work towards that consistent sense of manageability, step by step, that is how we build our bridge, connecting our past, our present, and our future. That's the idea behind coherence. And today's episode is called Bridge at the Top. So today we will look at bridging in a couple of different senses. And I will draw some on the paper here so it gets more clear. So, since the Second World War, and especially, I would argue, here in Sweden, where I live, since the Second World War, the society that we have built here in Sweden has been made increasingly centralized. So, at the top here in Sweden, let's say that we have this sort of point at the top. And this point can represent a few different things. It can represent laws and legal structure. It can represent our financial system. It can represent how we are allowed and not allowed to live. It can represent how we are allowed and not allowed to build our homes. How we are supposed to live together as people. So this is, I would say, especially true of Sweden, but I think it's in large part true for most of our Western world actually, but especially in Sweden. So here I make a few more points, or nodes as is popular to say in modern terms. So in Sweden, in a legal and financial sense, this is how a lot of our structure is being built and has been built since the Second World War. It's like most of our legal structure and financial structure is sort of regulated on an individual basis. This is us as individual Swedes connected to this sort of center point, or this centralized point. So when it comes to social security, for example, then each Swede since Second World War has been given a social security number, and all of our rights and duties is connected to this number as individuals. And the same is true for our financial system, with taxation and the like. All of that is formulated on an individual basis. So this individual's financial situation and taxes is kept separate to almost a full degree from this person or that person or this person. So in large part in Sweden, we connect to each other as citizens via this centralized point. And the same is true for our living conditions, how we build our homes. It is also based on individual basis. So it's very difficult, for example, for Swedes to sort of group together and make their own living situation. They have to sort of make it one by one with this centralized point, be it the government or banks or different departments of government. So this is increasingly, for these last 80 years, how it has been to be a Swede. And I guess in many cases as a Westerner as well. At least in Europe, that's been the case, in Northern Europe. So this has been the case since, let's say, 1945, since the end of the Second World War. 1945. But then, when the internet came, and when the smartphones came and social media came in the 90s and 20th century, the 1990s and the 2000s. Then it's like another sort of top point was created. So this top point, let's write perhaps 2009, when the social media platform sort of grew fast. Then these new tech companies, which grew bigger and bigger, they created their own sort of centralized connection to all of us. So then we also got like a connection to this central point, to each of us as individuals. So let's say that we sort of signed up for a social media platform. Then we wrote our credentials and we agreed to some terms of use, and data was being collected about us from these tech companies. And then we got this sort of situation that it's like we were putting our eggs in two different baskets, right? It's like, okay, in a sort of legal and financial and social security kind of sense, then we were still connected to this first central point, our government and so on, and the banks. But then we also started sort of putting our social eggs, our social dynamics, into another basket, being this sort of tech company central point. So all of a sudden we are putting our sort of different areas of life in two different centralized points, sometimes here and sometimes there. And that's been the case, this sort of double dynamics, these two central points, has been the dynamics since 2009, since social media platforms started, when we started signing up for these social media platforms. And then now 17 years have passed. And for these 17 years, we've been putting some of our areas of life in this point and other parts of our social life in this point. Okay. Still we have a sense of coherence. Still we have a sense of manageability. Like, I know that when it comes to sort of my living situation, my taxes, my social security, it's about this point. And when it comes to my sort of social interactions and my hobbies and my identity, maybe, I put a lot of my sort of interaction in this point. So sort of neatly organized, some things over here and some things over there, for this point and for that point. But then now we're seeing a new thing happening, namely the title of today's episode, Bridge at the Top. What is being done now, perhaps I will sort of make it look like this bridge I made here. A bridge is being formed between these 2 points. In a legal and financial sense, the governments and banks of old is now bridging themselves with the big tech companies. They are sort of making their own sort of coherence, their bridge behind one another, between one another. Okay, why is this a problem for you and me? Or why could this be a problem for you and me? Well, if these two central points start making their own agreements without much influence from us, it could sort of create this tearing force inside of us. Because we have been thinking that we have been organizing our lives neatly into these two different baskets. Okay, my financial situation and my social security and my sort of legal business, it's over here. And my social life and hobbies and friends are over here. But now when they are making a bridge between themselves in a legal, financial, social way, it can sort of put our two baskets on end and pour out all of our eggs, going here and there. It can crack some of our eggs. It can make us lose some of our eggs. It has the potential to sort of create this sort of crack in us between these two. I don't know if is it clear, like cracks in us between these 2 points. It can also make the connections between us more difficult. Put like a crack between us here. Make it more difficult for us to sort of understand one another. Basically making our sense of coherence more difficult. Because there is a distance here, right? Between us and these two central points. And when these 2 points are being more integrated, more made coherent, this distance can make us break between one another and inside of us. So now we're seeing, for example, more and more, we're seeing our governments, banks, and social security use more of the tech companies' infrastructure. So this stuff has wandered over here. And we're also seeing the tech companies getting more and more sort of legal leeway to sort of gain the function that our governments and banks have had before. So now the tech companies can sort of get financial possibilities they did not have before, and legal possibilities, and perhaps even possibilities when it comes to social security and the like. This is all making us confused. It presents us with difficulties to bridge our past, present, and future. We're seeing a lot of social unrest in the world, and I think this is one of the reasons why. We were putting sort of some of our areas of life into this central point and other areas into this central point. And now when they are connecting, it's like our sense of coherence is being sort of broken to some extent. Then what should we do? How do we sort of keep life coherent when so much is changing? That's the question we ask ourselves at the beginning of each episode here on Pausing with Erik. What do we do? What do we do with that? How do we bridge our lives when these two powerful points are bridging their life? Unfortunately, I don't think I have an easy answer to that. That's the reason why I say this question to myself and you, the listener, at the beginning of each episode. How do we keep life coherent when so much is changing? Because it affects everything in our life, and the pausing structure that I've created is one personal attempt to organize our lives in a structure that is not contingent upon these 2 points. It's sort of separate from these 2 points, or at least that's the ambition, to keep that structure as separate as possible from these 2 points, so that we may sit down like this and sort of reflect upon our sense of coherence, reflect on our bridge. So I guess my answer to what should we do, point like an arrow, what should we do with all of this? Pausing. Learn pausing and apply it, and gain some personal sense of structure in life. Build our own coherence. Pausing is great like that. It sort of slows everything down and helps our thinking. That's it for today. Thank you.